Hello and welcome to World Insight on CCTV News. I'm Tory in Beijing. And coming up on today's program, Obama lifts a decades-old arms ban on Vietnam. As the U.S. president begins a three-day visit to the country, we examine the potential impact of strengthening ties between the two nations that were once foes. And we sit down with Indian President Pranab Mukherjee for a discussion about the future of China-India relationship. Can the world's two largest emerging economies forge true cooperation? And we start today's show with Barack Obama's farewell trip to Asia. The U.S. leader is now on a three-day stay in Vietnam to strengthen ties. By his first visit to the nation since taking office, however, as a U.S. official said, you could not have a more contested, controversial, costly, tragic war than the Vietnam War. And now, however, Vietnam is becoming a partner of the United States, and an important partner. Well, this development is widely believed to be related to emerging China. We'll delve deep into that later, but first, let's take a look what this visit has so far achieved.
The third U.S. president to visit the nation after the Vietnam War. Obama said the U.S. is committed to a fully normalized relationship with Vietnam.
And I can also announce that the United States is fully lifting the ban on the sale of military equipment to Vietnam that has been in place for some 50 years. This change will ensure that Vietnam has access to the equipment it needs to defend itself and removes a lingering vestige of the Cold War.
In 2014, Washington partially lifted the embargo on arms in response to Vietnam's territorial dispute with China in the South China Sea. Also related to security issues is the nation's Cam Ranh Bay. It was once used by the U.S. and then the Soviet Union and Russia as a naval base until 2002. And now, it's widely believed that the U.S. might resume use of the bay. Economic cooperation also tops the agenda, especially as America is trying to sell its TPP.
I have not yet seen a credible argument that once we get TPP in place, we're going to be worse off. We are demonstrably better off. American workers and American businesses are better off if we get this deal passed. And I'm confident we will get it passed.
TPP would mean knocking down auto, food, and machine tariffs to get more U.S. products into Vietnam, as the U.S. is eyeing a fast-growing middle-class market. The trade deals signed during this trip are worth more than $16 billion U.S. dollars, including a deal with Boeing for 100 aircraft. Vietnam's trade with the United States is growing fast, with total trade amounting to about $45 billion in 2015. And Vietnam is now Southeast Asia's biggest exporter to the United States. From security to trade, the two are moving beyond a difficult and complicated history to find areas of common interest. And as the U.S.'s pivot to Asia strategy continues, cooperation between the two is expected to grow even stronger.
And for more on Obama's visit to Vietnam, we're joined here in the studio by Mr. Ye Hailing, researcher of the National Institute of International Strategy at Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. And in Washington, D.C., we have Mr. Douglas Powell, Vice President of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And in Singapore, we have invited Dr. Lee Hung Kiep, Research Fellow at the Vietnamese Studies Program in the Yusof Ishak Institute of Singapore. Let me start with you, Mr. Powell. Vietnam and the United States fought a costly war decades ago, and they haven't been seeing things eye to eye on many issues, but now Vietnam and the United States have become partners, close partners. What is actually behind this sudden rapprochement?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. One is that the Obama administration has been trying to clear up the leftover detritus of the Cold War, so we've seen improvements with Cuba, Iran, attempts at improvements with North Korea, and this very significant series of steps over several administrations with Vietnam. This bringing an end to the arms embargo, which was a direct product of the conflict back in the 1960s and 70s.
And Mr. Kiep, what do you think Vietnam is trying to take away from this kind of partnership? It is more about geopolitical, or it is more about economic cooperation?
Okay, so I think there are many interests for Vietnam in promoting this relationship with the U.S. We have a lot of interest in trade and investment, and also cooperation in education and technology and science, for example. But of course, it's an open secret that a major driver of bilateral relationship in recent years, the situation in the South China Sea. Vietnam needs U.S. support in its dispute over the South China Sea with other claimant states in the region, including China. And the U.S. also needs Vietnam cooperation in its rebalancing towards the region. So I think this relationship serves the national interest of both countries very well.
And Mr. Ye, looking at this historical context, China was once giving aid to Vietnam during the Vietnam War. And now there are disputes between China and Vietnam, but also there are economic cooperation. How close do you think the United States and Vietnam can develop a relationship of?
Actually, in the Chinese perspective, we prefer to read very carefully the timing of this visit. Actually, it's only a couple of months left for President Obama. So, in my understanding, at least my understanding, I think this for President Obama is mainly for the legacy of himself. It not only means the Americans' policy towards Vietnam, it also means Obama is ready to write the final chapter of his book. We call it Years in White House.
So this is going to be a legacy visit.
I think it's a legacy because we already know President Obama already make a kind of the several breakthrough on the diplomatic issues such as Cuba and Iran. Now it's Vietnam. So it's not a surprise for China. China could understand that this bilateral relation has their own domestic intention, but of course, it's undeniable they have some external expectation, especially for the South China Sea. But meanwhile, we have to admit or carefully read it. Whether such kind of the cooperation can bring some stability to this region or cause more problems, it also need to be evaluated.
Yes, of course. Mr. Paul, do you agree this is more symbolic than something of a substance?
Well, I wouldn't agree in that characterization. I don't think that was what my predecessor was saying. The United States is moving very strongly to develop economic ties. As China moves up the economic ladder and produces more valuable goods, the less valuable goods are being produced by Vietnam, whether it's primary fisheries, which the U.S. really buys from, or it's underwear, shoes, things that used to be made in South China that have moved down to Vietnam. And that will continue to grow. And we're seeing the same kind of relationship. That's not symbolic. That's very substantive. On the other hand, the willingness to overlook not overlook, but to integrate the objections of millions of Vietnamese immigrants who live in the United States and who have strong concerns about the political and human rights situation in Vietnam, that was overcome in part, that resistance, because of concern both in Hanoi and Washington about Chinese recent behavior in Southeast Asia and the South China Sea. So these are interrelated substantive matters, not just purely symbolic.
And one hallmark achievement, I think, for both sides is the TPP agreement. You as economists believe that no nation probably stands to gain more from TPP than Vietnam. The country's economy keeps rising in recent years. 2015 saw its GDP growth reach 6.68%, its highest of the past 5 years, and the TPP is going to become another driving force for the country. The World Bank estimated that Vietnam will probably get a GDP boost of 10% because of this by 2030. So what exactly will TPP mean for Vietnam, Mr. Hiệp? Can you give your analysis on how it will boost Vietnam's economy?
Okay, so Vietnam has a lot of hopes for the TPP. At the moment, Vietnamese economy is performing quite well, but the foundation is not very solid. The state-owned and the private sectors are not doing so well. The only sector that is doing well is the foreign investor sector. And at the same time, Vietnam is reliant a lot on foreign investment and export markets for its economic growth. And that's the reason why Vietnam has been investing a lot in signing a lot of FTAs with a lot of countries around the world, and that includes the TPP. And Vietnam also hopes to use the TPP as a source of pressure for pushing forward its domestic reforms, especially regarding the SOEs. All in all, Vietnam has a lot of interest in promoting this TPP deal with the United States and other countries. And earlier this year, the Central Committee of the Vietnamese Communist Party has voted to endorse the TPP, so it's very likely that Vietnam will ratify the TPP very soon, possibly in July, when the new National Assembly convenes its first session.
Well, that's interesting, Mr. Paul. Vietnam is very likely to ratify this trade agreement, but on the other hand, TPP is stalled in the U.S. Congress, and all the three candidates we see for the presidential election, Hillary, Trump, and Bernie Sanders, all oppose the TPP agreement. It's probably in the limbo in the U.S. That's very ironic.
I wouldn't expect candidates of either party to support TPP. That's not popular with the public. Our leaders have not explained to the public how important it is. But when it comes down to the end of this election, and we go into either the end of this year or maybe the latter part of next year, I'm confident that a president who wants, and probably every president will want, TPP, the president who wants it will get it. We've never had a trade agreement rejected by the Congress if the president really is determined to put pressure on the Congress to achieve it.
And here in China, of course, China is not part of TPP. It's not on the horizon. China will begin negotiations.
I don't think China have the interest on that.
But a closer economic relations between United States and Vietnam, also an economic competitor for China. What does it mean for China's economy and trade?
Actually, frankly speaking, I don't think Vietnam is the competitor of China.
But a lot of our low-end manufacturing has been shifted.
That's the point. Is
Vietnam.
low-end manufacturing. Not means the high tech. Not means the edge cut technology. It only means the based on the human resources and the local.
China shouldn't worry about manufacturing.
This
jobs
part
going
is China
to
want to
Vietnam.
transfer abroad. It's not China try to keep it inside China. Secondly, I would like to point out, for the economies or development of Vietnam, the best priority issue is to try to encourage the regional integrity in ASEAN framework. But TPP, not all of the ASEAN members will have the chance to join the TPP. So TPP basically will divide the ASEAN into different parts. Whether it's a good idea or bad idea, it depends on which perspective, and also it depends on the long-term development of the ASEAN.
Mr. He, do you think if China comes up with a regional trade agreement like RCEP that have better integration of Asian economies, also Vietnam will come on board and become part of it?
Sure, Vietnam is supporting both TPP and the RCEP, and it is benefiting from its integration into the regional trade and investment regimes. So Vietnam is willing to work with China on other initiatives as well, not just the TPP.
Another thing I want to talk about is the arms embargo lifting. Mr. Paul, the arms embargo has been fully lifted as announced by President Obama. Some analysts say, well, this lifting of ban will allow Vietnam to bolster its defense. Some others say it is just symbolic because Vietnam wouldn't buy arms from the U.S., the sophisticated weapons which are more expensive than the Russian ones. What do you think?
I think it's a mistake to try to say it's going to be either symbolic or substance. It'll be somewhere in between. Vietnam already has very substantial orders for naval equipment with Russia and with Sweden. The U.S. is not likely to be competitive there, but they do need things like drones for supervision of the maritime areas that it claims, and the U.S. can provide that. There are other kinds of equipment that will be complementary to the things that Vietnam's already acquired. Mostly Vietnam has Russian-based technologies, and a rapid switch to American-based technology standards would not be prudent in any event. You'd want to have a gradual switch over to more modern equipment, whether it comes from Russia or the United States, rather than a dramatically different supplier with a need for different kind of service networks and training.
Mr. Hiep, what is the defense acquisition strategy for Vietnam? Is it that you will buy more weapons from the U.S. and wean yourself off the reliance on Russian technology?
Okay, well, over the past few decades, Vietnam has been relying on Russia for most of its arms imports. Recently, it has been trying to diversify its sources of arms imports, but Russia still accounts for up to 90% of Vietnam's arms imports in recent years. So that means that even if the U.S. lifts its arms embargo on Vietnam, and Vietnam is willing to buy some weapons from the U.S., it will still take some time for Vietnam to do so, because it has to solve the problem of compatibility between the existing Russian weapons with the new weapons that it wants to buy, and also there's also the financial hurdles as well. Vietnam is now facing an increasing budget deficit, and you know U.S. weapons are rather expensive. So all these things tend to prevent Vietnam from acquiring any major systems of weapons in the near future. In the meantime, I think Vietnam will try to acquire some less expensive and less complicated arms equipment from the U.S., especially naval vessels or drones, as Mr. Powell has mentioned, or coastal raidars, or surveillance aircraft. These items are generally less expensive and should not pose any major compatibility problem for Vietnam. It will take some time for Vietnam. Yeah,
but as far as concrete deals is concerned, President Obama mentioned they have to look at it case by case and also have to associate with human rights records in Vietnam. What does that say to you?
Yes, that's right. Because now the administration has lifted the ban, but the Congress may interfere in certain cases. For example, if the deal is above $18 million, for example, or it involves some kinds of lethal weapons that the Congress wants to check, for example, they will interfere and decide on case-by-case basis. So that does not mean that Vietnam will acquire whatever it wants from the US.
From China's perspective, will this change the balance of power and the security situation in
I don't think there is a
Asia?
balanced power in South China Sea between China and Vietnam. Obviously, it's out of the question. Secondly, actually, even Vietnam want to buy some weapons from the United States. We can raise another example, the armed deal between India and America. Actually, India enjoyed more advantageous position, much better than Vietnam, but still, this go very slow because the India also received a lot of weapon system from Russia, and a lot of the Russian staffs, technical engineers, they stay in India.
But
so
India
really difficult.
But India is not in maritime disputes with China.
So the question is that it's very difficult for American to allow this high-tech weapon system get the chance to be seen or be get by the Russian engineers. So the high technology weapon system is basically not impossible. And for the second-hand weapon system, why China should worry about it?
Another thing is Cam Bay. It seems that Vietnam is considering opening access to foreign militaries to use the Cam Bay. Do you think it is feasible that in the near future that Vietnam will allow U.S. military vessels to come and use Cam Bay, Mr. Hiep?
Okay, Vietnam has made it clear that it will turn Cam Bay into a kind of commercial center or logistic hub for regional navies, and it welcomes all navies to use the services there. Vietnam has even welcomed the PLA Navy, to use the services there as well. So I think it's very possible that in the near future, Vietnam will grant access to U.S. naval ships or warships to these facilities.
Is there any strategic thinking behind the U.S. military of getting access to this strategic bay, Mr. Paul? Do you think U.S. and Vietnam might have upgraded military cooperation?
I think in this case, symbolism is stronger than the strategic impulse to show that the U.S. and Vietnam have healed their past differences and can cooperate for mutual maintenance of freedom of navigation and peaceful territorial disputes. The U.S. will welcome a Vietnam that can maintain a high technology capability at Cam Ranh Bay. Unlike in the past where basically the United States controlled the base and provided the technicians and logistics. Vietnam will be doing that on a commercial basis, and the more navies that use it, the more commercially viable and high technology capable will the Cam Ranh Bay facilities be. So that basically is in the U.S.
But is
interest
U.S.
to share
comfortable
it
sharing
use it ourselves.
sharing this port with other militaries like Russia and Chinese and Japanese?
Absolutely, that's the way of the future. Exclusive basing structure is a thing of the 19th and early 20th century. Now that Asia has caught up in so many ways, having to transplant a base from overseas into the region is no longer appropriate.
Coming back to China's understanding of this, many people here in China argue that the closer relations between Vietnam and America is actually a part of a bigger geopolitical game aimed at containing China. Do you think it is the case, and how China should handle this?
It's understandable for China to keep this thought, because even for American, President Obama also mentioned that there's a South China Sea issue involved. But I don't think it's very strategic importance for this bilateral relationship. Firstly, in the South China Sea, no matter whether Vietnam and America has some coalition or coordination, they still work together. And secondly, in Chinese perspective, no matter what happened in Kowloon Bay, China still will going to do what they should be done. So that's a normal case for China. And China, it's very difficult for China to see, oh, it's a surprising news. So it will happen, and sooner. Actually, we know it's only several months left for President Obama. So it's a better moment for China to watch carefully what's the next president will make the choice. And still a lot of the debate, including BP, including the military ties with Vietnam.
And there might be some rethinking of pivot to Asia.
And also the Congress has a different thought.
Okay, we're running out of time. Thank you very much, Mr. Ye, Mr. Pa, and Mr. Hiet, for your analysis on this. Stay with us here on World Inside. We've got one more part, the final segment coming up. Indian President Pranab Mukherjee shares some predictions on the future of China-India relationship. Can the world's two largest emerging economies find common ground? Stay tuned. Welcome back. Indian President Pranab Mukherjee will pay a state visit to China from May the 24th to the 27th at the invitation of Chinese President Xi Jinping. It will be his first state visit to China since taking office in 2012. Chinese leaders will hold talks with Mukherjee to exchange views on bilateral ties and issues of mutual interest. And Mr. Mukherjee will also visit the city of Guangzhou in southern China. Prior to his visit, we sat down with the Indian president to hear his thoughts on China-India relationship.
Indian President Pranab Mukherjee will soon kick off a three-day state visit to China. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Hong Lei said it is one of the most important high-level interactions between the neighboring countries this year. The China-India relationship has maintained healthy and stable development in recent years. In 2014, President Xi visited India, and the previous year, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited China. Relations between contemporary China and India have been characterized by border disputes. However, since the late 1980s, both countries have successfully worked to reignite diplomatic and economic ties. And they have also attempted to extend strategic and military relations. Last year, leaders of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization passed a resolution to start the procedure of granting India full membership in the organization. which analysts hailed as opening the door to more regional cooperation and stability. Membership in the SCO ensures that China and India will also have more cooperation in counterterrorism efforts in the coming years. Mukherjee's state visit to China is expected to push forward a stronger developmental partnership between the countries.
How do you see the current China-India relations, and what's your agenda for the coming visit to China this time?
First of all, I would say that we have very comprehensive relationship with People's Republic of China, and we consider it is a very important relationship for us. And every state visit has its own significance, as it provides an opportunity to the leaders to share their views, explore the possibilities of expanding cooperation between the countries concerned, and also they exchange their views on regional, global and multilateral issues. My visit to China would be my first visit to that great country as the President of the Republic of India. Though earlier many presidents have visited China, including my immediate predecessor, Mrs. Pratibha Patil, she also visited China. But China has its own importance. Our relationship between China and India, as I mentioned, comprehensive. It covers all aspects: political, security, economic, educational, and cultural. I had the privilege of receiving His Excellency President Xi Jinping when he visited last in 2014 and hosted a banquet for him. He extended an invitation to me, to the Prime Minister, and I am glad to have this opportunity to respond to his invitation, because it is our efforts to intensify our relationship. And this state visit, interaction with the leaders, having dialogue with the leadership of the country and various cross-sections of the people, always enhance the possibilities of cooperation. Therefore, my objective is to discuss all important issues, and surely you have noticed that we desire to constantly engage ourselves in dialogue to find a resolution of all outstanding issues which we consider hold back our developmental, fully utilizing our developmental potentiality. Keeping that objective in view, my visit, I do hope, will also provide an opportunity to expand and deepen our relationships in trade, commerce, investment. We are doing fine, but full potentiality is not yet implemented, exploited. That's why we want to resolve all outstanding issues which will be mutually acceptable, keeping in view the aspirations, concerns, sensitivity of each countries, and to find out accepted resolution of the outstanding issues.
Okay. How do you think should the two countries cooperate together in counter-terrorism as the two major powers in the region? And what kind of role do you think the SCO should play in this field?
It's a very important question, and it is also very relevant, because terrorism has emerged as the great menace and perhaps the biggest challenge to the peace, tranquility of the world. It has no respect for any boundary. It is not confined to any territorial limit. It spreads its venom and hatred all over the world. Therefore, to check terrorism, comprehensive efforts by all countries concerned are needed. We have been the victim of terror activities for a very long period of time. And we know that how menacing terrorism is. India and China, both huge countries, multicultural, multiracial, if they come together in fighting this menace, I am sure it will have its own impact. And India always believes that every country should have a zero tolerance policy towards terrorism. And the fight is to be all out, all comprehensive. There cannot be any qualification in fighting this menace. The new, not exactly new mechanism, it existed, but India is going to be the full member of the mechanism, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Certain formalities are to be complied with, and I feel in this year itself, India will be the full member. And naturally, like many other forums, it will also provide an opportunity to expand our cooperation and to help each other in fighting this menace.
In addition to anti-terrorism efforts, China-India trade cooperation is also expanding on a large scale. The growing collaboration between the two fastest-growing economies in the world could potentially change the paradigm of their economic relationship. In the last 5 years, many Chinese companies have invested in India. Alibaba has bought a 25% stake in India's e-commerce website Paytm. Huawei has invested $170 million in a research and development center, its first outside of China. Xiaomi is planning to set up a data center in India. And a new government-sponsored initiative called Make in India encourages companies from elsewhere to manufacture in India. Bilateral trade has grown substantially in recent years. Nevertheless, it's heavily skewed towards China.
Chinese pharmaceutical industry could gain considerably by collaborating with Indian pharmaceutical companies, especially companies that manufacture and export generic drugs. There are a host of areas where India could gain from China, whether it be civil construction, infrastructure, light engineering, agriculture.
China's One Belt, One Road initiative is facilitating several projects that will likely balance the situation. One of these is the India-China City, which will boost commodities exchanges between the two nations. As infrastructure and other areas of exchange continue to grow, the two countries are aiming for win-win cooperation.
First of all, we must express our appreciation because our economic cooperation is expanding, trade is expanding, volume of trade is increasing every year.
Yes.
And I do hope in future it will be possible for us to expand our economic cooperation in depth and in physical expansion. We have established a number of mechanisms. Joint Economic Commission. We have mechanism of dialogue at high level for security. We have established mechanism of mutual consultations, and we do, whenever we get the opportunity of discussing with each other. And India requires investment from China because in areas like infrastructure, trade, development of modernization and development of railways, communication, manufacturing are the field in which investment from China is welcome. We do feel our Make in India program, Digital India program, Smart Cities program will open windows for Chinese investment, and we have the mechanism through which these investments could be assured and there would be no risk in investment. Therefore, I do feel that our trade, economic and commercial cooperation, including investment, should not be confined to a couple of areas or couple of commodities. It would be comprehensive, and that possibilities are there. In this connection, I would also like to suggest, perhaps China may have little flexible approach in respect to the foreign investment in sectors like pharmaceutical, agro products, where India has developed expertise and has emerged as an important global player, and where there is immense requirement of China. And that will address not only in terms of expansion of the volume of trades between two countries, but also the current distortion to some extent we have in the trade balance. It will help both the countries to address the trade balance if sizable investment takes place from China to India. And that's why we always welcome investment from China.
China and India, as we all know, are the most ancient civilizations around the world. So how do you think should the two countries cooperate together to their advantage? And in what else aspect do you think the two countries can cooperate?
And exactly that is the area that we have cooperated with each other in the most peaceful, problem-free ways over the centuries. Travelers have come. We have built up institutions where the civilizations met. Over the years we have traded with each other. Therefore I do feel, and it is because of this reason I am taking a large number of academicians, university vice chancellors, director NITs with me, so that we can build up cooperation in the field of education, culture, and we want to liberalize the process of traveling to each other. Because if there is frequent exchange and people to people contacts are established, that will provide the necessary momentum to expand and deepen our relationship. Therefore, when these two old civilizations come together, and as we more than often we used to say, that if we work together on the world platform, World will notice and world will appreciate that the 2.5 billion people of these two older civilizational countries have come together. They are working together. That would be the most remarkable thing. And in this connection, I would like to take this opportunity of conveying my best wishes to all your viewers and through your medium to brothers and sisters of this great country, People's Republic of China.
Indian President Mukherjee talking to CCTV. And that's it for today. If you'd like to see more, you can visit our website just to type World Inside CCTV News into your search engine, or you can check out our YouTube channel if you live overseas. From me, Zhou and everyone here at World Inside team, thanks for watching, and tune in again next time for more insights from across China and around the world.